Hello everyone and welcome to the Dyslexia Life Hacks Show. I'm your host Matthew Head, and in this episode I'm talking to Michael Fisher. He's a civil engineer working within airport infrastructure. He's worked his way up to a senior position after starting as a draftsman and studying in his spare time at college to get a HNC and a HND, and along the way has picked up a Bachelor in Science in Civil Engineering. Alongside his civil engineering career, in his spare time he hosts his own podcast, Leadership and Construction. He also has his own editing business, Fisher Audiocast, which provides podcast and audiobook production and website design. As always, I'll put links to Michael's businesses, his podcast, and other things we talk about in the show notes, which will be available at dyslexialifehacks.com/podcast. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you, Matthew.
So where I want to kick off the conversation today really is in your civil engineering career. I mean, you and I have a similar profession that we're both professional engineers. However, I'm on the automotive side and you're on the civil stuff. So a little bit of clarification of terms. What is a civil engineer and what got you excited in civil engineering?
Okay. What is civil engineering is a very good question. Pretty much everything that you see, touch, feel, or hear, watch, it's all had civil engineering related to it. So the minute you turn on the taps in the morning to brush your teeth, boil the kettle, the roads that your cars go on, the drainage that collects the water from the rain, the buildings that you work in, the hospitals that surgeons work in, airports, everything has a civil engineer attached to it in some way or some form. And my area of expertise is in airfield design. So
okay.
I've worked for the sort of last 15 to 16 years in and out, sort of working in the airport industry, designing runways, taxiways, aprons, hangars involved in terminals, and recently sort of started to dabble in data centers. But it's all civil engineering. It's all the same sort of thing. So primarily it's pavements, it's drainage, it's services. So around an airport, they've got a lot of services to control the lights, to control the instruments that help the aircraft to land, and they go all across the airport. Airport typically could be about 2 miles long, so it's a big asset. And so all the infrastructure works that's required in order to pull those cables to where they need to go. So that's sort of in a real nutshell what a civil engineer is. What got me into it? Well, I'm actually a little bit jealous of you, really, because I started off wanting to do automotive engineer. I don't think I was clever enough for it, to be honest. I at school, my teachers just didn't believe that I would ever go down that route. I was big into Formula One. I had dreams of working for McLaren and being able to travel the world as a mechanic or as an engineer for that team. And I wanted to go to Loughborough actually to do automotive engineering. And I was never, ever going to get the grades. I knew I was never going to get the grades to do that. Didn't mean I wasn't clever enough. It just means I wasn't academic enough to go and get those kind of grades. Yeah. And I started to look at other options, really. I knew that engineering as a topic was where I wanted to go because I've always, part of having dyslexia is I've always been really creative and really inventive. And so by being an engineer, I feel like I can invent and design things, which is what I wanted to do. And I personally didn't know what civil engineering was. I just kind of got pushed into it. I went for a job interview at 17 years old after finishing my A-levels. I hadn't had my results yet. As a drafts person for a company called RPS Bert's Green. And I had this idea researching into them that I wanted to be an architect because they do architecture and they do engineering. And the gentleman sat across me doing the interview. When I said in the interview I wanted to be an architect, he just looked up from my CV and says, "No, you'll be an engineer." And that was the end of it. Like, I didn't get any more say in that. And so luckily I got a place. They put me through college. On about the third day, I was told I was going to be doing civil engineering, working in airports. I'm like, that sounds rubbish. That sounded like everybody was like, look, pleased that I got that job instead of anybody else. Everybody else wouldn't work on big buildings and sheds and more exciting things than that. I say that's what it felt like at the time, but yes. Bizarrely enough, that was the industry for me. I absolutely love working in the industry. I'd like to say I've become an expert in that field because it's something I'm very knowledgeable about. But also the same person that told me I wouldn't be an architect and I would be an engineer, he ended up being my mentor and pushed me through my professional qualification years later.
What do you think that person saw in your CV that he thought, no, not an architect, you're better off at the engineering path?
I don't know. It's probably a question I should ask him, to be honest. But I think the subjects I was doing at school were more along the lines of maths, science. I was big into physics, and I wasn't the greatest at the math side of it, but I was very much interested in how things worked. And so I did technology as well. I just really interested into how things work. And the sad thing is, I suppose, my parents for like Christmases and birthday would buy me books about how things worked, which is why I was sort of interested in like mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, because all those books are geared around that. None of those books are geared around how drainage work or how you put a pavement together. So civil engineering was never an aspect that I thought would be a career path. But yeah, I was really into cars. I still am into cars. I just don't do it as a profession. But I think in my CV, having those kind of like interests, I think he sort of thought that fits better towards more sort of engineering side. And I look at some of the colleagues who went into architecture. They were more graphics design, arty than I was. So I think that might have been the sort of reason for it. And it's paved the path for me, to be honest. And I can't imagine a life or a career having not done that. So
similar kind of thing to me. Like I remember getting mocked for having old Haynes manuals that my granddad gave me in my book collection because I just liked the whole, that photo there on the front where you could see through the car and how it all went together. Yeah, maths and science. So, interesting. The same pull pulls us towards the engineering career. So you obviously must have left school and gone straight into your draft person job and then picked up your HND and your HNC after that. At what point did your degree then eventually come along?
Well, I guess, again, degree was never on the cards. During my sort of studies of HNC, HND, I working as a draftsperson, so I was drawing drawings for engineers on AutoCAD, and I really got into that. I really was I quite liked doing that side of things. I quite took a lot of pride about making something really clear and visually appealing to someone who was going to build whatever I was designing, whether it be a hangar or a pavement. So I really took a lot of pride in the drawings. And I sort of got to the stage where I thought, I might just stay doing this forever. This was what I might do forever. And I got to the end of the H&D and I thought, that's what I'm going to do. But my wife, who wasn't my wife at the time, but my fiance and my mum were sort of saying, it's 2 more years, just maybe you should see it out. Go and top up your H&D to degree. And I don't really fancy doing that. I'm just going to stick to what I'm doing. And a couple of my friends who I was doing H&D with, they said, well, we think we're going to do it. So I thought, all right, I'll do it as well.
Peer pressure stops when you give in.
So I hadn't really planned to go to uni and do that. But my friends that were going, they said, well, we're doing it. I'll go and do it as well. It was really good fun doing it, especially with the friends that I did it with, because it was just so much more enjoyable than college. College was really, really hard. For someone with dyslexia, the college lecturers really didn't know how to support. Whereas at university, I think it's just more drilled into them. They have a better understanding and the assignments and exams were far more structured. So it benefited me much better. So I had much more enjoyable time of that. And I came out with a reasonable degree at the end of it. So I was really proud of that achievement. And then straight out the back of that, I thought, well, I might as well just keep going. I'll go and get professionally qualified as well. So then I just kept going with that and then just keep going.
Okay, so that brings me to really, you mentioned a person with dyslexia at college. At that point, did you know you were dyslexic? Sort of what point in life were you aware that there's something different about the way you think?
Well, the point in my life when I realized I think differently, I don't know if I ever really had that epiphany that I'm sort of think differently, but I was diagnosed when I was 6. So my mum had this, yeah. So my mum had not got this connection that at home I appeared to be quite bright, interested in a lot of things. I think I was always trying to do something. I could never sort of sit still. Yet my teachers at school were saying I was lazy. I wasn't going to ever amount to much. And that was a common theme throughout all of school, and not really so much college, but certainly all school, was that I was lazy. I was never really going to amount to much. And so she was like, but this isn't, at home, this isn't the same person. So she said, she did some research, and she's in the education system herself. And she sort of went to the teachers and said, I think this is dyslexia. I think we should get him tested. And the teachers weren't having any of it, just said, no, he's not. He's just lazy. He can do it. He just doesn't want to do it. And so after eye tests, because they thought I couldn't read the board because of my eyes and all this kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah. That seems to be a classic one.
Yeah.
And the optician's a liar.
Yeah, I can see, I just can't read the goddamn thing. I got tested, and then when the report came out, obviously I couldn't read it. My mum read it, and she's like, Jesus Christ, this is exactly Michael. Like, this is in a nutshell. We've found what the causes of this, why there's this such disconnect between school and home. Went to the school again and said, no, I have got the evidence now. He's been assessed, he's got dyslexia. And the school just weren't interested, did not want to help, did not want to put anything in place, completely denied it. And so my mum took me out and put me in another school that actually specialized in it. Good. And it was a good thing that she did that. I met more people with dyslexia and had an understanding of what I had. I did constantly feel dumb, I think. I was sort of, I think the education system has a way of doing that because it's not geared up to cater for the strengths that people with dyslexia have. And I don't think that is the case even today. I think we've got better at school at identifying children with dyslexia. But I still don't think we have a good grasp of how to cater for that. And employers are the same. They don't have this understanding that, it's not a disability that we have to accommodate. It's a strength. And how can we, it can be a strength if used and deployed in the correct way.
Yes, I think so. And it's really interesting with the school. Clearly, your mum had quite a big fight with the school in terms of even when you got it in black and white and you've got proof from educational psychologists, I assume, that you are dyslexic, that they fought you on it to the point where your mum had to change schools. I mean, I suppose you can't really remember too much back as a 6-year-old, but did you feel a step change when the new school that specialised in it, did that help you a lot? How did that change things? So I think that underneath it all, throughout, complete from primary school through to secondary school, I've completely rejected any help. Like, I didn't want to be seen to be different. I didn't want to do things differently. The choir. The difference with the schools was I went from a big school to a smaller school. It was a much smaller village. It was a long way away. So my sister and I were often the first children at the school in the morning and the last children to leave. And that was fine. I enjoyed that. But we were such a small school. And I think the difference that I felt was I was among other people that had sort of similar way of thinking to me. But I remember we went to something called Learning Support, LS, which I thought was a bit of a joke. I enjoyed doing it because mostly it was games. So it was fun. And it was a few of my friends. So it was good fun. Yeah. But what actually highlighted to me more than anything is actually sitting around other people with dyslexia that were like getting things, like we're learning things from this process and from Learning Support. I thought, this isn't actually helping me at all. Like, shit, I'm really dyslexic. Like, if I can't make it here, yes, I see. Yeah.
Like I this it highlighted to me just actually, I don't want to say how bad I have dyslexia or I had dyslexia or whatever, but just how different I was. And I think from then on, I rejected any sort of support. Through secondary school, there wasn't much great support. So I didn't go to what they had. College, there was nothing, not that they had to provide anything. I had sort of the student loans type stuff that gave you like laptops and printers and stuff like that, and some technology like Dragon. So it was talk to and it's like dictate stuff, so it would type stuff up for you, which is all great stuff. But I never used the software, and so I never really helped myself a lot. But yeah, I just completely sort of rejected it all, right through. Apart from the 25% in exams, extra time, then that was brilliant. I definitely took that. Even though they were like packing away the chairs around you, it's like it's 6 o'clock at night. We want to go home. I've still got 3 hours of my exam to go.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? Because I remember through maybe this is how bad primary school was for me, but I don't have any memories of it. But secondary school, just wanting to fit in, like having to explain why you need to disappear off partway through a lesson because you're having the extra lessons to help you through, and the colour filters and all that kind of stuff that I never used, even though I got given them because I didn't want to pull them out and explain in class. And then how it hangs on through. But yeah, the one thing you always stuck at is the extra time, like, because it's funny how everything else seemed for me to be ashamed of. But the extra time is something everybody else wanted, so you got it. And that was something everybody else is envious of. But
yeah,
people take the mickey out of colour filters and funny pens and coloured notepads. But it's a shame, really, because that want to fit in almost hinders your own education to a point, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think I went into this space at school where I did the bits of lessons that I enjoyed, and I just tried to avoid the bits I sucked at. So for like technology, I was really good with a breadboard. Like I could visualize how to wire a breadboard and do it really quickly. I hung out with people who've got PhDs now and people who are like super intelligent. So they were my friends. So when I was like, well, they're A-star students. So when I'm coming along and able to like wire a breadboard quicker than they can, it was a bit like, this is a bit of, they sort of downplayed it. Like, well, it's a bit of a rubbish task anyway. It's not really going to get you out, like, sort of thing, which is sort of fine. But, I had and any sort of things like being able to sort of see things differently. And there was a big part of empathy as well there. I was able, team leadership and working in teams. I was very sort of sporty as well. So getting involved in teams and trying to do football and do rugby and try and be good at that. And I just tried to stay away from anything I wasn't very good at. And so I in technology, I would be really good at all the practical stuff, but then I would just completely flunk any of the coursework. Like,
yes. And do you find that being good at the practical stuff gave your self-esteem a bit of a push-up, so it wasn't quite down in the gutter after struggling with some of the exams and the coursework?
Yeah, I think I just enjoyed doing it. So if someone had sat me down and says, "Okay, Mike, for your day at school today, all you got to do is wire these breadboards," that would have been a great day at school for me. Or or build stuff with Meccano or build stuff with Lego. That would have been a great day for me, which I suppose it would be for most people. But, I just, loathed having to do coursework and exams. And I suppose that's that's the same for a lot of people. I know it is, but it just was not pleasant.
And it's funny, isn't it? With you say with the breadboards, where you pull the circuitry and wire them all up, that I still now, if I was doing a circuit diagram, even when it got complicated, my university exams for the engineering degree, would sort of visualize that in my head. Well, I'll put this wire here and plug it all in. And you start using the visual skills you've learned for that kind of thing through later on in life when you're doing high level studies.
And it's strange, really, because I use those same parts of my brain. I can almost feel that I'm using those same parts of brain when in my day-to-day job now. Like I do a lot of contracts. I work with contracts, which is bizarre because I hate reading and hate writing, but I get involved with contracts a lot. And the bit I like about the contracts is that there are bits of it which are interconnected, and one leads to another, and you have to find this clause that relates to this part of this contract. And this interconnectivity of like a 3D wire mesh of a contract, it's I find that quite interesting. I can, it's like you can almost arrive at an answer quicker, but without sort of any explanation. It's like, oh, that's the answer. That's how you do that. How did you get there? How did that work?
Yeah.
So I use the same parts of brain from when I was at school wiring a breadboard as I do today, writing and reading contracts and administrating contracts.
That's really interesting. So that's the positive side, isn't it? You use the visual skills to pull all that through and come up with a solution. How are you getting around not being hung up in the loathing of reading it? Because there's a barrier to entry almost at that point, isn't there? If you get through that barrier, you suddenly bang, you're into your limit. You're into your visual and connective skills to work your way through it. But how do you get through the initial hardship of it?
That's a good question. I think if the question you're asking is sort of what tools or tips do I use to sort of get into sort of, I mean, I do love
maybe
reading.
It's even personal mindset.
Yeah. I mean, I do love reading and I do love learning. I had a hard time at school. I had a easier time at college and even easier at university. But I do love learning. Like I am constantly trying to learn a new thing. You go on a new course, and with every new course, with every new bit of learning you've got to do, there's inevitably a lot of reading involved. And so I think when I'm really passionate about a subject, it's dead easy to sort of get into it. I find that actually I skim read past lots of it and try and plug some of the gaps. And then when there's a couple of paragraphs that are really interesting, I'll read it. So and the problem I find, and I think this is typical of someone with dyslexia, is as you're reading, mine will start to wonder about that topic, and then you'll be wondering and then get into a rabbit hole and go, oh, hang a minute, I was reading this book, and then you've got to try and pick up where you were before.
Yes. Yeah. Do you find you're partway through it and your brain goes into problem solving mode of this particular thing of the contract you need to fix? You're like, yes, I've got this. Oh, no, I need to finish reading the contract.
Oh,
first.
That's it. Yeah, just get into sort of rabbit holes. But I mean, even just general. I mean, again, I'm sad. I don't really read like novels and storybooks, but I read books around leadership and books around. I've sort of had a challenge, set myself a challenge this year to read 5 books, and particularly 5 leadership books, and I did that. And so I thought, okay, and what am I going to read now? Something that I don't have to read, that's not really leadership based. And it's a book, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but it's called Sapiens. I think it's quite well known. Yeah, it's good. Yeah. And funnily enough, I picked up he's got 3 books, and I picked the one up that's in the middle, which is it was written for the present time, but it's probably now history because it talks about Donald Trump getting into Washington and Brexit. So that was quite a few years ago, actually. But I remember I got about halfway through that book whilst my wife was in labour with our second child. So she was there in a lot of pain, and I was like, I'll just keep reading this page, Dana. And so I sort of abandoned that book because it just got too much. And I just, one of the things you got to really invest your time into. But I thought, I'm going to buy all these books, and I'm going to start off with Sapiens. I'm going to read it through properly, start to finish, because it's a bit of Sapiens is the history, 21 lessons for the 21st century is today, or 5 years ago, and Homo Deus, which is us of the future. What's it going to be like when we've got our brains inside a computer, things like that. So I want to read it from start to finish, and I'm sort of halfway through Sapiens now, what I do is I really get to bits of the book that I really enjoy, and I really read into, this is really interesting. And then my mind sort of wanders. So the habit that I've got into for all those books and for Sapien is just read. Doesn't matter how much you read, just read a page or a paragraph a day, if it's morning and night. So I tend to have the book with me wherever I go. So if I'm going to bed, I might flick through a couple of pages and try and read a couple of pages. And I try not to worry if it's going in or not. I'm just reading it for the enjoyment of reading it there and then. And then in the morning, whilst I'm having a coffee, just before getting ready for work and taking the kids on the school run, trying to read a couple more pages then. And I find that to be the easiest way to do it. And then I'm just sort of chipping away at it. And I'm not trying to say, right, I'm going to read 10 paragraphs, 10 chapters, or I'm going to read a chapter. I'm just going to read a page or a paragraph. And I think what I've sort of learned over time is this thing called marginal gains, which is like just 1% gains, which I think sort of stems, or there's a book called by James Clear that's about atomic habits, and that really, and I started reading that and I put that down, so I will read that one again.
It's a good book.
It starts off talking about marginal gains and these 1% changes, and I think that's critical to any sort of development, and small steps are, over a long period of time are much better than big steps over, try to condense it in a short space of time. So sort of what works for me is trying to find something I really am passionate about. Is leadership. So I'm interested in that. So I want to read books about that already. I want to read books by people that I look up to, like Simon Sinek and Gary Vee, and just read, or set a target just reading a page or a paragraph a day. And if you do that, you just chip away at it. And then you find, actually, I'm really interested in it today, so I'll just read it. But I'm totally jealous of my wife, who can literally read a book in a day, and I just don't get that,
Yes, yeah. Somebody who can take 3 books on holiday. You're a 3? How many holidays are you going on?
I know. And I'm a sucker really for taking books with me, but never even reading them,
Yes. Yeah. If you get sucked into a page turn, it's fine. It's the ones that take warming up are hard work.
I don't know if any other people with dyslexia are like this, but I tend to just be really happy in a really quiet room, possibly even in the dark sometimes, and just get completely lost in just thinking about things and thinking about how things work and thinking about how to solve problems. Sometimes it might be about solving problems in the world, or it might be solving a problem at work, or solving a problem with a podcast or something like that, or trying to grow a business, and just immersing myself in this like imaginary world, and I actually, when my wife started sort of dating, if you like to call that, or when we first started to be together, we would go away for a break together. She'd be reading, and I'd just be sitting there just thinking. She'd be like, "You're bored?" No, I'm good. Yeah. I'm just sat here, just thinking about all sorts of things, and I prefer that's how I unwind really.
Yeah. I've sat on planes visualizing the flow over the wings and how the aero's working and why the windows do this and what's the stress of this and all this kind of. You can get lost in things, aren't you? Sat there with your headphone case looking at how it's molded and how they've done it, reverse engineering it while sat there because there's nothing to do. But I tend to find, as you say, like a quiet bit of downtime. You just kind of, you're not even thinking hard. You're just letting your brain marinate on things and even glancing around the room, like, I wonder how that thing over there is made. And you kind of then reverse it back through its process to see what it's doing. Of course, you and I have a career where we are trying to work out how things are made and make things happen all the time. Now, kind of how does dyslexia really help you? And you've touched on it really quite a few times with how dyslexia helps you as a civil engineer, but really into the heavy details of it. You sort of visualizing the one runs. I tend to find as what I do with the CAD packages I work on, that quite a lot of times I've got the solution in my head way before the CAD screen's got it, and can see move stuff around and manipulate it around in my own mind's eye before I need to start pulling it around on a screen.
Yeah, I think I'm the same really. It's funny. So we use CAD, which is primarily a 2D based design software. We use, as civil engineers, there's all sorts of different 3D softwares out there. For like architects, they mostly use a product called Revit. For like mechanical or industry, it might be SolidWorks, something like that. There's a element of 3D modeling software out there. In civil engineering, the primary modeling tool that we use software is called Civil 3D, and it's by Autodesk. Oh, yes. And what I find is quite interesting sometimes is using Civil 3D or AutoCAD. If you can imagine what you want it to look like your taxiway or your bit of pavement, because how you want it to perform and how you want it to drain in a particular way. And you can visualize it, if I got to go around this corner, how you want the aircraft to be able to follow that center line. And it's really great when you think about that and you think, well, how am I going to construct that? What parts of the software I'm going to be able to use? And you can almost build it up in your mind before applying it to the software. And I love it when I can do that and then put it into the software once and it comes out perfect. And that does happen occasionally. I love it when that happens. I'm thinking, brilliant. I just imagined it all in my mind, and then all of a sudden I've managed to be able to see it in the computer screen. And then before you know it, you're putting these onto drawings and, really taking pride about the drawings and making sure that probably the biggest problem in construction is communication. How does a designer tell a contractor who's never seen the project, doesn't understand the background behind the project, to build what I'm trying to do? So when you talk about Haynes Manual, my job was kind of like design the Haynes Manual for how to build this taxiway and how to fix it in the future when it goes wrong. Being able to take that model and then communicate it into a series of drawings that someone can build it from, but also someone that can fix it from in the future. So I think in a way, dyslexia helps me in that way. In being able to visualize how things I want them to appear and see. And the other, there's a few, so I'll try not to take too much time up on this. The one thing that people really get wound up with me about is about, I tell my colleagues, particularly people doing the drawings and writing reports, is tell the story. Is it's no good just our clients just going straight. Here's the answer. Don't worry. Trust me. I'm an engineer. You've got to walk them through it. You've got to explain.
You mean you haven't got the mug that says "Trust me, I'm an engineer"?
I do. That's what my wife bought me when I passed my professional qualification. But it's we as engineers, particularly, and I don't want to say something wrong here, but those that are usually neurotypical, we just okay. Here's the answer. That's the answer. Build that. And actually, I think what I try and get people to do is, okay, well, try and walk people through, try and walk the client, try and walk the contractor through how we've got to this answer and what we've tried and what we haven't tried. Because when people can understand the context, particularly contractors, because I'm very good at designing things, not so good at building things, I need someone who's really good at building things to say, actually, we're going to build that in a different order. So if you did it like this, that might work. And then okay, that's great. Well, we'll work that into the design, or actually, no, that won't work because X, Y, and Z. Once we've walked them through the design, they can see, I can see why you've got there, how you've got there. Let's try it a different way if you want. And I think good thing with dyslexia is being able to sort of tell a story and have that sort of story mindset. And then I think the final one, one of there's a few more, but one of the other ones I think key one is around construction is very much a people-based industry. We think it's all about diggers and technology and science and maths and It's all about the people. We can't build anything if we don't pull people from different cultures, different environments, different knowledge, different skills, all together to build the same thing. On a given project, you're going to have architects, civil engineers, structural engineers, architectural technologists, quantity surveyors, all people. And then you'll have the ground workers who are really good at using, the tools and the excavators. We've got to try and pull all these people together to build the same thing and for us on a common goal for the client. And so the common way of doing it is to, and it's probably not unique to the construction industry, but it's very prevalent in the construction industry, is command and control. It's very much shout, tell people, you do this, you do it now, you do it in this way. And what I and others are trying to drive forward is a better way of doing things, which is sort of through sort of leadership and learning more about leadership and better communication tools, how we make our employees feel heard and valued. How do we make them feel psychologically safe? How do we do that on a project team basis? How do we do that how do we get an integration between the designers, the client, the contractors, all to work together in a common way? And I think the skills that I have with dyslexia are really good at that. I'm actually much better leader than I am an engineer. And I got to a point in my career where I decided, actually, I need to do less of the technical stuff, stop talking about concrete and start talking about people. And the minute I did that, my management style, if you like, or my leadership became much better. And my goal is to get the best teams working together, get the most skilled people working together. And certainly dyslexia, I think, helps with that. I don't know if I even answered your question there. And I think there's probably 3 or 4 that I could think of.
No, it's great. And what that leads me off to really is, where did the interest in leadership come from? Was there a particular event that kind of catalyzed this in your mind?
Yeah. I think I always thought I was really good at leadership because I'd listened to lots of Gary Vee, his podcasts. And so I thought, well, I'm really good at leadership because I listened to a lot of Simon Sinek and Gary Vee. So
yeah, but Gary Vee's very high octane, isn't he?
he does a lot of different things. And Simon Sinek, who I really look up to, and others, lots of other people as well. And I thought I was really good at leadership, but there was a point in my career, and I can probably put it down to the day really, when I realized that I really had no clue about what I was doing as a leader. Okay. So I'd only just become professionally qualified, and I'd led teams before on smaller projects, but I was put in charge pretty much straight away of 2 fairly significant construction projects. So I had 2 projects, 2 teams working on these projects, and sort of very quickly, projects weren't going the way I expected them to go, and people weren't turning up to meetings and weren't contributing to meetings when they did turn up, and relationships with good friends of mine started to break down. I think I sort of became that boss that I was sort of explaining the command and control, do this, do that. I'm not listening to you. And it hit me really hard. And I thought, well, what is going on? Why aren't I able to do this now? Why are the projects going so bad? And I really sort of started to get worried that I knew that I was part of the problem, if not the problem. And I started to get worried, like, how can I turn this around? Because this is a big project. I've got something to prove now. I'm professionally qualified. I've got to prove to my peers, my boss, that I can do this job. I suppose there was a bit of imposter syndrome in there as well. Yeah, but I was so embarrassed that I was like failing that I didn't tell anyone. I just sort of sunk and went into got really stressed out about it. And I literally had this one day where I think I hit rock bottom. And I called my dad up on the way home from work. And it was probably about this sort of time of year. It was dark and it was raining. And I'd sort of, had enough, and I just didn't know where to turn. My dad is a really good leader in his own sort of industry. So I thought, I've got to speak to him. If anybody's going to know the right answer, it's going to be him. And he said to me in that call, come over for Sunday dinner, bring the kids over, and we'll cook Sunday dinner, and I'll walk you through some ideas. It's like, oh, brilliant. I'm going to turn up on Monday, the world's best leader after this, because I'm going to get all the silver bullets from him. And of course, that didn't happen. I turned up to Sunday dinner, which was really lovely. And my dad pulled me to one side and said, right, here you go. He handed me over a bag, which was a bag full of books and a notepad and pen. And he said, read these. I was like, you really don't know me, do you, Dad? Like, there's no chance I'm going to read these. And he walked me through a few of them. And funnily enough, my dad is big into leadership, and some of the books he has are books that me and my sister bought for him for Christmas, when we were like 5, 6,
Yeah.
Love you, Dad. Happy Christmas, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so he's read all these books, and he's a really good reader, and he likes those sort of things as well. And he sort of walked me through some books, and I just came away feeling completely deflated. Like, there's no way these books are going to help me. This is ridiculous. I just can't believe I've just wasted my time. But okay. So I took the books away with me, and then Monday morning, I came down early to the kitchen and saw these books on the side, and I'm going to read one of them. I might as well, what I've got to lose. And I picked the smallest and the thinnest book of them all. I thought, I'll read this one. And it is, I think there's no understatement to say that book literally changed my life, because reading that book, and it was such a page turn. I read the whole book in the one morning, and it was small enough and thin enough to do that. And it had tactics and skills and strategies already in there that I could implement straight away. Like, I was reading it thinking, I've got that problem. Oh yeah, I've got that problem. And they were some solutions there, or some ways forward. And I realized this is going to take longer than a day to learn, but I can start trying today. And so I started trying, and then I thought, wow, well, that book was good. I'm going to read another, and then another, and then I'm going to try this course. I'm going to keep trying things with my colleagues and see how it goes. And slowly but surely, things really started to turn around. I thought, this is the answer I've been looking for, and it's going to be something that I continually learn about. But I'm starting to get things right, and I turned the projects around, and I started, friendships got stronger, and then the pandemic hit, and we all went virtually. And I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, this is a new challenge.
Yes, just changed the rules of the game a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And it was actually a really good challenge. And actually, because our team was condensed to few people, and I was the leader of that team, it gave me a good opportunity I'm going to really nail this time around. I'm going to start from the beginning of this project. It's going to be all the right strategies and leadership. I'm going to really make these people feel safe and heard, and I'm going to make them involved in everything and help them to develop themselves and really make it a good project. And I think it's universally agreed within that team that project we worked on was the best project. I'm not saying I'm the catalyst for that, but I think me not shouting and not telling people what to do every 5 minutes, I think helped. And I think it was a good project. We did have a good time on that project. And actually now going forward, I employ or deploy those skills more and more every single day. And I feel like I get feedback from people that they're progressing and they feel developed and heard, and they want to do more. And so I'm slowly building a team of really great individuals that are inspired and feel safe enough at work to try and push the boundaries. And I think that's the other part of dyslexia, is that trying to be innovative. We have all these companies, and I'm sure the automotive engineering industry is no different. We all say that we're really innovative, but what does that actually fucking mean? Like, we say it, and I don't know if we actually really are. And so what I try and get my colleagues to do is to think differently. And that's the beauty about being dyslexic, is we think outside the box. We think differently. And I'm trying to get people to think differently, but to feel safe that you can try something, and if you fail, that's good. That's fine. We found one way, it doesn't work. So the next time we try something, it might work. So, and really giving people that freedom to do it. As engineers, I think we're suckers for being able to pick up a design standard and go, right, here's the answer, build it, rather than trying to, as you were mentioning earlier, reverse engineer things. Yeah. And if we apply this to, say, sustainability, and, civil engineers play a massive role in trying to reach net zero carbon, and trying to use, our biggest problem is trying to continue to build things with an ever depleting resource. Or natural resources. We can't build road without aggregates or sand, cement. You can't build all that sort of stuff. So we have to reverse engineer things and start from the end and work your way back to the beginning and go, right, this is how we're going to do it. And so trying to get people into that mindset of doing it in that order has been a challenge. But now we're doing that and figuring things out that way. The projects that we're working on now not only are they being more sustainable, but they're also being more economical for our clients. Yeah. So it's working out really well, having this reverse mindset way of thinking and deconstructing problems and rebuilding them back up again. Again, I think that's just a typical sort of engineer dyslexic type trait, and I think that's another sort of thing.
I think so, and I think certainly, sort of the engineer trait as well as dyslexia trait. I'm trying to think, because some of the bits I'm designing for a car are informed by the fact I used to be a mechanic. So I already know what the end looks like as per a serviceability point of view. But you do sort of visualize walking through it. I'm looking at it like, what's it look like on the screen? How's the stylist want it? How's it fit on the car in the first place? How's it going to panel gap to the next bit on it? How's the person going to take it off when they want to replace it? All this life cycle thing. And you were sort of touching heavily on leadership. We're talking about leadership as well. And I think being dyslexic, being able to see the 10,000 feet view of everything really helps with that. And you did mention in your early thing that you sort of mentioned, heard it coined as decentralized command, where actually, rather than I'm guilty of this as well, where we're trying to still be the technical expert in everything, that actually need to let go of the range slightly on that. Let your technical experts who report to you deal with that, or you lean back in command and watch it from a high level view to make sure all the pieces come together, and inspire and empower them to move the project forwards in the best way possible.
Yeah, I can give you a really good example that I did that today. And about being a leader is about knowing when to mentor, when to coach. So I had a colleague who's learning to use this Civil 3D software that we talked about earlier. And so this new project, I gave him complete free rein on it. You try it. If you fail, fine, that's good. You're going to learn. And we're getting towards the end of the project. Budget's really tight. Haven't got a lot left time on it.
Yeah. Everybody wants everything 3 weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah. We found a bit of a mistake. It's like, okay, this is fine. Because we find mistakes, and this is how we're going to deal with it. And let him work out the mistake, work out the problem, how we're going to solve it, manage to solve it. But things weren't looking quite right still. And we got to the point where I was doing a bit of mentoring, because I've got more experience about, showing him the intricacies about how we do it this way. And I said, we've got to a point where this is good enough. We could send this out now. It would be built and it would be perfect. But there's actually this extra little bit that if we do it, will make you better at your job and make you feel more accomplished, because it will be a better product always around. It won't really make anything different on site. And I know we haven't got any more money or any time or budget or any more time, but it's far more important for you and for the team that you learn skill and you learn it in the proper way. So we're going to spend another half a day allowing you to make sure that we get this right. And walked him through it, but let him take the reins a bit and let him do his little bit. And he learned something new. And the end product was, that bit more polished. Yes. And he could take even more pride in the work that he'd done. But out the back of that, he knew that I valued the bigger picture of the team, of him, even if he takes that skill set off to a different company, that I want him to develop and I want the team to develop over and above. I want the project to be successful, because what I get out the back end of that is I get successful projects and happy clients, because my team are feeling inspired and motivated to put in their best effort and find a polished, finished product. And so that's a real life example that happened today.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And it's a great trait, that, isn't it? That you send the right signals to the right people. That it's not just about purely ticking the box that delivers the part or the product out to your end user and hitting project deadlines. Now, I'm going to touch on your podcast. Leadership in Construction? I feel like it's more of a continuation of the conversation we're having now, but more of a less dyslexia focused and more general leadership focused. Do you want to just touch on a bit about what's expected to be tuned into your podcast?
Yeah, well, I think I'll just start off by saying sort of how I got into it. I thought of just because of the pandemic, and I'd really sort of geared into getting into really learn about leadership. I'd lacked that ability to speak to other leaders and other people from more senior positions about leadership. So I put a list out onto my LinkedIn page and sort of said, I'm looking for people to talk to me about leadership. I had this idea, I'm going to need to record it because I'm going to instantly forget what everybody says. And there's no point in me writing things down because I won't be able to read it. So I thought, well, I'm going to record it. I may as well think about putting it out on YouTube and podcast. And so then this birth of a podcast, Leadership in Construction, was born. And I literally had no idea what I was doing. I just turned on Zoom, recorded it with a few guests, and put it up on YouTube and on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And it's done all right. I think the biggest thing I got out of it is I learned a lot, and I met a lot of people, and I met a lot of great people. And the more and more I practice it and speak to people, the more I realize that I'm getting better as a leader, and I'm doing more the right things than what people are talking about. It's like, oh yeah, I do that. That's good. So that's how it sort of started. And if you wanted to tune in and to listen to that, it's very niche because it's for leaders in construction. But actually, if you're into leadership just in general in any industry, this is touching base. I don't just interview people from construction. I've got coaches from the States. I've people working, a storyteller, someone that is a storyteller and works with businesses to help improve their storytelling. And all these, I've interviewed someone who has dyslexia. We talked about dyslexia in construction for one episode, and yeah, there's loads that talked about contracts with all sorts of different topics. So it's not just really about leadership in construction, although there is that theme about how we can make construction a better place through looking at other industries and looking at leadership practices. And I think it's worked out really well, and I hope it's made and changed some people's lives. I don't know if it has, but if you were to tune into it, you would get practical insights about leading. There's a couple of episodes that I could recommend for people. Episode I interviewed with my CEO. My CEO called me up and said, "Mike, could I be a guest?" I was like, I can't say no, can I?" But John Chubb, great guy, really knowledgeable about leadership. He's ex Royal Navy, so he's going to know his stuff around leadership, and a really great CEO, and really some practical advice in there that I think everybody would be able to take some really good stuff away. A podcast with a guy called Dave Stitt, who is a construction team coach, but again, he's just a big advocate for coaching and coaching style of conversations. So that's another great episode. And another one with a civil engineer called Nathaniel Pickard. And again, just really great practical advice in there that people can use and deploy into leadership of any industry, but particularly construction. And then there's loads of other great podcasts about coaching. There's a couple of podcasts about women in construction, because we really need to grow our awareness about women in construction and have more representation of women in construction, particularly at senior levels. There's podcasts about, construction has one of the highest mortality rates. So we see a lot of fatalities in construction, more than any other industry, and it's still relatively low, but one is too many. So we have the most. We lead the way in fatalities, but also we lead the way in suicides as well. So mental health is a big thing. So we had a podcast around mental health and getting people, particularly blokes, to be a bit more open about talking about things. So we talked about mental fitness rather than mental well-being and mental health. It's about mental fitness,
yes,
getting your mind more resilient. And so I did one with a gentleman who is really being an advocate for construction mental fitness, and then I did an intensive sort of like 10-week course. Or not really a course, a bit of a coaching session with a coach from America about a positive mindset and mental fitness, which is, again, my eye-opening and really helpful for anybody in any sort of industry who just wants to improve in terms of their mental fitness. So we've touched on a lot of topics. And plan to keep going and growing that. I'm writing a book with a couple of the people that helped me with the podcast around leadership, specifically in construction. But again, it relates to all industries really. And doing courses and all sorts. It's just about finding the time to do it all, because I've got so many ideas about I want to do everything. I want to do it all now, but it's about picking the right thing. The book was meant to come out in January. It's delayed, unfortunately, for things outside of our control. But it will be out soon. And it's, I think it also, the thing about like that, I've always wanted to write a book because I do like books. I do like writing. I'm just, not the fastest reader and I'm just not the best writer. I'm good at storytelling, just, get the words mixed up and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I wanted to always do author. And this is the way sort of doing it. And I think it helps to highlight to the people with dyslexia that you can literally do anything you want. This shouldn't be something that holds you back. You can even write books. And there are many authors who are dyslexic, like Agatha Christie is a famous dyslexic author. So there's that's just another way of sort of highlighting that you can literally do anything. And the podcast, itself is about leadership because I'm passionate about that. But as I'm becoming more of a manager and less of a technical, creative, caddy person, learning about podcasts and how to do the audio side of things and edit that and make quality audio, how to do all the artwork and all that kind of stuff, it taps into my creativity side and arty side of stuff.
Right.
So I discovered that I actually liked producing and making the podcasts more than I did talking about the subject on my podcast. I enjoyed the conversations and learning the leadership stuff, but actually I found I actually just like making quality podcasts. I just like mixing up the audio and editing the audio and doing all the artwork and taking something from concept to launching it. And I do that in my day job as an engineer, as a project manager, thinking of something at inception level, at really like concept development stage, right through to we've built it and it's in use sort of thing. And so, I can apply all that to sort of same podcast as well. So that does sort of tap into sort of the bits about dyslexia, which is also a part of me.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, if you say, with the shift of gears into a leadership management role, that you come home and almost have a rest by doing more work, which I imagine to some people sounds odd, but it's not. You're just driving the other stream of your mind and satisfying the creative bits. You can sit there, camp at the computer, do all the creative stuff, and imagine you're half listening along when it's not your own podcast when you're editing it.
No, I do. I think that's the brilliant thing about editing other people's podcasts. I get to hear and listen to all these podcasts. Some of them have been brilliant. Like I've learned loads. Listen to the people's podcasts. I'm going to try that. And I've tried some things and seen some real differences out of it. It's like, okay, so there's some good stuff in here. Everybody needs to hear this. So I feel like helping others as well.
It's really interesting, just that mind shift of from my project manager flow to a creative flow. I sometimes find it like I could have had a long day at work. Maybe I've had to jump on and edit something with this podcast. and I'll go pick the guitar up for 40 minutes. And it's like, it's not sitting in the chair, scrolling through YouTube or doing nothing. It's like totally dives into a different bit of the brain. And I suddenly feel refreshed at the end of it. And it's really funny, isn't it? How just these shifting the mental stream into something else acts as a relaxation thing, even if you haven't actually physically stopped doing stuff, you know?
Yeah. And again, I sort of half suspect I sort of have a touch of ADHD as well.
Okay.
I've never been diagnosed, but it's something that as more people have started talking about it, I'm thinking, that sounds a little bit familiar. But the route to actually getting diagnosed, I discovered recently, is quite hard. And can cost quite a lot of money. So I don't think I'm going to go down the route of formally being diagnosed with someone with ADHD. I just something in the back, because it doesn't really change what I do and how I do it, or how I manage what I do. So I thought, thinking, well, if it is ADHD, great. It doesn't really make a difference to what I do on the daily. Might make me understand what I do a bit more. But and if it isn't, again, it doesn't really matter, because I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing anyway. But I tend to never not be busy. I tend to always sort of be doing something and thinking of doing something the next. My wife will see me on my phone, like, I'm 9 out of 10 times on my phone, I'm researching onto the next project. I'm researching on how I do something. It's amazing how you can learn skills like how to edit a podcast and how to grow a podcast and all that kind of stuff through just research and going on Google and YouTube and all that sort of stuff, and making connections on LinkedIn. And I think that's just, my brain is just constantly trying to figure out solutions to problems. And it's interesting you talked about sitting down and doing guitar, because I've got 2 guitars behind me now. I'm not able to jump on them as much as I'd love to be able to do it, but I find it very difficult to mimic other people's songs. So I just make up my own.
Yes.
Which I just love to do. I just literally sit there and you can just sit there for hours, just play different chord progressions and just different combinations of chords and think, oh, that sounds pretty good. I'll do that a bit more. And then, okay, I quite like that. And then I'll try and put some licks and solos around that and see how that sounds. And I suppose you could see that as downtime. I don't suppose I get, in inverted commas, downtime to sort of really do that, because I'm just so busy doing everything else. But I would like to sit down and just play guitar more and just,
disappear into it for a bit.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, this brings me sort of neatly round to closing off this podcast. Now, each episode ends up with 3 rapid fire questions from myself. I say rapid fire because they're quick questions from me. They don't necessarily need short answers from you. Shall we dive into question number 1?
Let's go for it.
Cool. Question number 1 is, what prejudice have you had about dyslexia that's been proven wrong?
Prejudices that have been proven wrong about dyslexia. Dyslexics hate to read.
Yes.
I've never met anybody who has dyslexia that hates to read and can't read. I think actually they have a really good level of reading. It's the attention to reading and skipping words and not being able to get it all in and read it. I think I get mixed up with you can't read or you struggle with reading. It's like, well, actually, I it's not easy, but I do like to read and I do read. So shouldn't come as a surprise that I've got a bookshelf of books and that sort of thing. Yeah. So that's one. I'll try and keep these quick, I promise.
No, you don't have to. No, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I don't read so much, but I do a lot of audiobooks. It's not like I don't like consuming fiction and non-fiction. It's just sometimes the reading and attention is. But there are a lot of people on this podcast that do really enjoy reading.
Yeah.
Cool. Into question number 2. So if an alien landed and you had to describe dyslexia to them, how would you do it?
Quite. Okay. I would say that dyslexia is a wiring of the brain that allows you to think differently to everybody else, that allows you to see the world in a completely different way, in a different perspective, that creates amazing things and can change the world, if that doesn't sound too cheesy.
No, it's cool. Change the world through engineering and use dyslexia to inform the engineering. Why not?
I got this sort of theory that any sort of pioneers, early Homo sapiens, the Homo sapiens that invented agriculture were dyslexic. So
that'd be really interesting if anybody could ever find that out.
I don't know if that'll ever be proved, but then I can't be disproved. So it's a good theory.
We go with it. Okay, cool. And the last sort of proper question for me on this podcast, and seeing as this is called the Dyslexia Life Hacks Show, what is your favorite dyslexia life hack?
Right. Favorite dyslexia life hack? Ooh, it's a good question. I'll take some time to think about that one.
No, take as much time as you need.
I should have been a bit more prepared for this question. This question almost seems very obvious. The best hack, and now my dyslexic brain is completely flawed by this question.
Kicked it into overdrive, right?
I mean, there's several things that I could say, and I think one of the hacks, I suppose, if you can call it a hack, that I exercise on the daily is what I mentioned sort of earlier.
Okay.
Is when you're trying to read and you've got a book to read, you've got something you've got to read. It's just to break it down into sort of manageable chunks. Like I just read 1 or 2 pages or even a paragraph a day. And just sort of think about it from the perspective of marginal gains. Even if you're reading a paragraph a day, you're still making progress. It might not be as fast as someone else that can read a book with no problems, but you're still making progress. And I think we underestimate the power and don't appreciate how good sort of marginal gains is. We think we always need to make these big, profound steps in life, but actually, some of the best steps and the most progressive steps are the ones that you do at 1% and little by little. So I suppose if you can call that a hack, that's probably the most useful hack. And it's certainly something that I exercise on the daily.
It's something I do. Like if I could just creep an inch forward, still, progress over perfection, and just keep moving on. Like continuous improvement should be a way of living a life, really. Cool. Well, before we sign off, where can people find you and your podcast and your editing business as well? And is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, where you can find me, predominantly on LinkedIn. So on LinkedIn, it's just Michael Fisher. Coincidentally on there, it sounds weird to say I'm openly dyslexic. It sounds like something I hide, but I advertise openly that, I've got dyslexia, which has raised a few eyebrows in the past. But LinkedIn is probably the best place to get hold of me. And then the podcast Leadership in Construction is on every podcast audio platform. So Spotify and Apple and Google and Amazon. So any one of those, you can go and listen to it. And in terms of the business, so Fisher Audiocast, that is just, I'm probably saying it's just fisheraudiocast.com. And you can also find it on LinkedIn as well. And just say, just to plug that a little bit, that sort of started off. I had this idea in my head that I really like doing the editing side of things. Maybe I could do that as a thing and earn some extra income. And a friend came to me and asked for some advice, and I sort of gave him sort of advice. And I sort of said, you know what, I could edit some bits for you, and I could train your staff on how to do it in the future if you'd be interested in doing that. And he said, how much? And I gave him a random figure out the air. I don't know if this is good or bad or right. And they went for it, which is great. And that was my first client. And I thought, well, this is the start. And throughout the whole year, I've consistently had clients, multiple clients at a time, all working. Mostly, it's all in my sort of free time. So it's mostly weekends and in the evenings for my clients. And yeah, that's growing. So I'm taking on more clients, and I've got some employees as well. So I can't do all the work myself. So I've got other people that help me with the business. And that's inspired me on to even start off another business as well with another business partner, which is about social media management. So another venture. And again, I think this just taps into dyslexia, ADHD. It's just that I just got to this point where I don't see a cap or a limit on the things that I'm doing. I'm not just Mike the engineer or Mike the podcaster. I actually want to do a lot of different things. And I don't actually see there being restrictions or a limit to what I can do or to what anybody can do if they put their mind to it. So I'm just going to go at absolutely everything I want to do and try and just make it work and have fun doing it. I've got a grand plan of creating a construction documentary that will, help promote construction to the masses and get people into the construction industry, but also help the construction industry have some pride in ourselves about our own industry. And that's the plan that I want. And how do you connect the civil engineer turn podcaster, turn producer, turn documentary creator with no experience? It's fine. I don't care if I don't have experience. I'm still going to do it. And I'm still going to find a way of doing it. And I'm going to help get people around me that know how to do these things to help me out. And I think that's one of the other things about being dyslexic, and is just having drive, determination, grit, and just not being able to stop and just wanting to keep on going. So yeah. Thank you for letting me plug it a little bit.
No problem at all. And thank you very much for taking the time to come on the podcast. It's been really cool hearing on the background and comparing and contrasting our sort of stories into engineering career, and a lot of interesting stuff on leadership as well. So I want to thank you for all that.
Thank you.
And I want to thank everybody else for taking the time to listen, and I will talk to you in the next episode. Goodbye for now.